Welcome to the starter guide for Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord. It's finally released over 2 years later in early access, and now I need to update my guide because there's been so many changes to all the perks, how the different leveling system works, and it's been really refined. So in this video we're going to go over the best starting cultural background based on your playstyle. I'll explain each one and the pros and cons of every faction. We'll also go over character creation, your character's background, and also what each skill does and different resources you can use to kind of plan out your character and how you're going to get access to the best perks in the game and what you probably shouldn't waste your time, attribute and skill points on, and just how the system in general works. The only thing I ask in return is if you find this video helpful, please do drop a like because it really does support me, and also let other people know that the game is actually out now and you could play it. So starting out, we have our character's cultural background. Now your cultural background doesn't make a difference when it comes to what types of troops you can hire or which kingdom you can join or be a mercenary for. No difference at all. It does however have an effect on the loyalty of the different fiefs and towns that you'll later potentially own in the game or capture, if they're not in the same culture as you. So for example, if we have a look at the starting map, we can see that each capturable settlement has a cultural loyalty to one of the 10 factions. If I have an Empire cultural background, for example, and I take a Khuzaits settlement, it will start with a -3 loyalty after I capture it. There are however ways of mitigating this through different skills and perks, or instead you can just select a companion as the governor that has the same cultural background to manage that town for you. I should also mention that the Empire has the most settlements in the entire game with the Empire cultural background compared to any other faction. This actually makes them one of the best factions to pick if you plan to own a kingdom later on in your playthrough. But that said, the most important factor when deciding your cultural background is purely selecting what's going to fit your playstyle the best. If you want to roleplay a filthy rich trader, the Aserai faction is by far the best. Firstly, caravans are 30% cheaper to build. This gives you a huge saving of over 5,000 gold to make a caravan. Then you get a 10% reduction in trade penalty, which just means you get cheaper buying and selling prices, which is what you spend most of the game doing. You also have no 0.5 movement speed penalty when moving through the desert. The drawback, however, is a 5% increase to troop wages, which makes having an army more expensive, but since you're making a lot more gold, that will be alleviated. Next we have the Khuzaits, the Mongol horse lords that are themed around the dynamic cavalry army playstyle. Firstly, recruiting and upgrading any mounted troops is now 10% cheaper. And since mounted troops are the most costly to recruit and upgrade, this is an incredibly potent buff. The Khuzaits also get a 25% bonus to horse and livestock production in villages owned by Khuzait rulers. So when it comes to selling your villagers' produces, this can lead to a 30% increase in profits compared to not having this perk. The drawback, however, is that each town you own gives you 20% less base tax income. This only affects towns though, and it's easily manageable. Now, if you're a fan of the Khuzait culture and you're watching this all the way through, here's a little Easter egg for you. It's this awesome graphic design illustration t-shirt we made of a Mongolian battle. It's very much inspired by Bannerlord and it looks incredibly cool. There's just so much action going on in this, and you can actually get this on a t-shirt. It's one of the best ways to support the channel as well. Each one that's sold, I get $5 in return. The quality is also really good. Some of you guys will remember this t-shirt I made ages ago. I've been washing this and wearing it quite often on stream, and as you can see, like, the print quality is really good, and it sticks its color and it doesn't wear out or anything. So I recommend checking it out if you like the design. Next we have Battania, arguably one of the best cultures in the entire game. Firstly, we get 50% less speed penalty in forests. This means you can easily outmaneuver your enemies in woodlands, and the sight range boost makes it easier to ambush and evade foes. Towns owned by Battanian rulers also have +1 military production, incredibly powerful when stacked with other perks for a sizable defensive force, reducing the need for a garrison. However, you have 10% slower build rate for town projects, which is taken off after modifiers, making progression even slower. But again, you can work around this. Next we have the Vladian Knights of the West, who get 5% more renown from battles. This really starts to add up over the whole course of the game, and renown is incredibly important in building your faction, kingdom, and clan. 15% more income while serving as a mercenary is rather specific to a certain playstyle, but it's pretty useful in the mid game, and it can really start to add up on the larger contracts, increasing income by over 500 or more gold a day. Now a 10% boost to the production of villagers attached to a castle results in 10% more money, which is obviously a nice benefit. The drawback is recruiting lords to armies costing 20% more influence. This can be frustrating late game when you make your own kingdom or you're trying to win a pivotal decision without having to farm some influence first. Next we have Sturgia, the Vikings of the North. Firstly, recruiting and upgrading infantry troops are 25% cheaper. A considerable saving for leveling up infantry over the course of the game. This will lead you to a huge saving. Armies also lose 20% less daily cohesion, meaning your armies will last longer before having to dissipate. It's nice, but it's not going to change your life. The drawback is 20% more relationship penalty from kingdom decisions, which creates added conflict between nobles and you on some of the votes, but you can work around this. Overall, Sturgia is sadly one of the lesser cultural backgrounds in the entire game. Next we have Empire, which is one of the best late game options if you're making your own kingdom, since they get 20% reduction to garrison costs. This adds up to an insane saving later on in the game. The additional influence farm you get from joining or creating an army with companions is a great way to farm influence, but you get a minus 20% hearth growth for villagers, which will negatively affect food production and militia size. It can however be managed though. Overall, I'd say my top 3 factions are the Battanians, the Aserai, and the Empire. But in reality, you can play any one of these factions effectively and win the game. It's really not that hard. So I suggest picking one purely on your playstyle. Next we have character creation, and I mean, I love just pressing the randomization button and seeing what kind of different troll we can create in character creation. And you may be wondering why I've included this in the starter guide. Well, interestingly, the height of your character actually affects the gameplay if you want to be a real min-maxer. If you have a very big height, it actually increases the size of your character model, meaning you can move slightly faster. But also, interestingly, the way that the weapon damage is calculated, being taller, when you go for like an overhead swing, it gives you a bigger velocity to your swings. It's like a small advantage, but it means you can do slightly more damage. Kind of makes sense, I guess, just being bigger. Just like in real life, being tall is just better. And obviously, if you're a hobbit, then you have a higher resistance to the ring. So that's good as well. Next we have your character background and how they grew up. Your choices here affect your starting attributes and focus point allocation depending on what you pick. Each cultural background that you had a choice between earlier also has different starting choices with different skill allocation. I'll talk more about that later though. Firstly though, before we go through all of this, we need to understand how to build your character in Bannerlord and what attributes, focus points, and perks actually do. But before I break this down, I would highly suggest just jumping in with whatever playstyle you think you'll have the most fun with. You don't need to min-max your character at all to beat Bannerlord. It's actually quite a simple and easy game. But once you've actually started the game, if you go down here on the left to your character screen, firstly we have your attributes, which is your vigor, control, endurance, intelligence, and so on. Your attribute level affects the speed that you level each of the attached skill, and the skill level cap that you can reach with those skills as well. It does not affect how much damage you do or how fast you run or anything like that. The level of the relevant skill would affect that instead. Think of attributes as allowing you to unlock the highest level perks for each skill. However, you only have enough attribute points to specialize into 2 attributes to level 10. Now there's a useful website linked down below in the description that lists all the skills in the game. Here on the skill tab, it explains how to level each one of these skills and what the skill actually does and its effects on gameplay. If you click on the perk info tab, it will show you all of the perks in the game for each skill, and it will also break down each one that you click on, exactly how they work and what effects they have on the gameplay. You can also see what level that each perk is unlocked. Secondly though, we have focus points, which we get each time we level up. If we assign a focus point to a skill, it increases the maximum learning limit for that skill. You can see there with the green area. If we didn't do this, we would be limited to only leveling a skill up to the maximum green area. You can see focus points also increase the speed in which that we learn the skill. You can have a maximum of 5 focus points in any skill. As a point of reference, you start the game with at least 2 attribute points in each attribute. If I wanted to level up my medicine, I could invest 5 focus points into that skill, and then I would be able to level it up to 200. Beyond that, I would need to increase my intelligence attribute to unlock any perks over level 200. As a rule of thumb for every skill, if you have 7 in an attribute and 5 focus points, you'll be able to level that skill all the way up to 288, and the highest perk unlock is at 275. So you should be spending your attribute points to unlock the best perks in the game that you want for your character build. But I would honestly recommend just going for it on your first playthrough instead of min-maxing your character, because that's always the best way to learn, and the game is easily completable even with the worst character build. But now back to our family's background. As I said before, this is just a starting point that won't matter very much several hours from now. But as you're clicking through the options, the most important thing to have is your attribute points in the attributes that support the skills you're going to want to max out first, or the ones with the obtainable perks that you're most excited to get for that playthrough. I would advise against investing attributes into vigor or control, since it does not increase the damage you do with your weapons. Instead, just use focus points exclusively to level your combat skills, unless you're going for some kind of one-man army combat character build. Remember that each culture also has its own starting stat choices that you can see here. The cultural background is more important than not being able to select the perfect starting build for a character playstyle that you want. And now we're ready to start the game, and if you want to see my character build and my playthrough with even more getting starter tips, making loads of money, getting a good companion who can master the skills that maybe your character build is weak on, then I recommend checking out my part 1 let's play just over here. I'll also link it down below in the description. But before you go, drop a like on the video because that really helps support me, and also make sure that other people actually know that Bannerlord is out now, because I don't see many people talking about it, but I'm super hyped for this game and I want to see it do really well. So thanks for watching.